Grief can feel silent. And that's how the images coming out of Gaza felt this morning. People digging for survivors under the rubble of buildings brought down by Israeli airstrikes. Here they're calling for someone named Mohammed. Too often there is no answer, and too often the victims are children. More than 50 have died in Gaza so far, according to health officials.
There is no way to measure the suffering. A life of a child matters.
Today, the International Committee of the Red Cross called on world leaders to pressure both sides to stop the fighting now. Suhair Zakut is with their Gaza office.
Civilians should be spared the attacks. Both direct and indiscriminate attacks are prohibited by international humanitarian law.
Israel insists it tries to avoid civilian casualties. Yesterday, this scene was captured of a Gazan property owner begging an Israeli military official to allow journalists more time to collect their belongings from a building earmarked for destruction. They're not going to get weapons, he's saying. They're going to get their work gear. Israel says Hamas was employing a typical technique of hiding assets behind civilian shields. In an interview on U.S. television today, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pointed to the one-hour warning given to the journalists as an example of Israeli care.
It wasn't luck. It's because we took special pains to call people in those buildings to make sure that the premises were vacated.
Netanyahu says there will be no end to the Israeli campaign until the Hamas threat is neutralized. And Hamas and other militant groups are still firing rockets into Israel. Most are shot down by Israel's anti-missile defense system, Iron Dome. But the sheer amount of rocket fire is terrifying because some do get through. They've already killed 2 Israeli children, and today one hit a synagogue in Ashkelon. There are now fears fighting will intensify even further as Hamas and Israel look to apply maximum damage ahead of any ceasefire. That means more fear ahead for Israelis and Palestinians alike. We're afraid because the bombing is random and the houses fall on their inhabitants, says Mohammed Shahada, who lived on the Gaza Street bombed earlier in the day. With little chance of escape from a territory still under blockade, there is nowhere to run in Gaza, leaving many with no option but to surrender to the hobbling rhythm of a story repeating itself.
And Margaret, the turmoil hasn't been confined to Gaza today.
That's right, Ian. There are a number of different fronts, and one of them has been growing Palestinian anger over what they see as Israeli attempts to expel them from occupied East Jerusalem, and one neighborhood in particular. And tonight, a Palestinian man smashed his car at speed into an Israeli checkpoint at that neighborhood. He was then shot dead by Israeli security officers who've been bringing in giant concrete blocks, maybe to build some kind of barricade. But this really does have the potential to turn into another flashpoint, reigniting demonstrations over East Jerusalem, potentially with the power to prolong what's actually happening in Gaza.
Margaret Evans in Jerusalem tonight. Thank you.